today we're going to go over affirmations, why they work, and how to use them. So for those of you joining online today, if you have access to your keyboard, I would like for you to add your email address into the chat, please. This is a way for me to give you the post survey. And the post survey is just a way for you to give me your feedback and your suggestions about this training and also future trainings. If you have a topic you want me to discuss, if there's something maybe I've gone over in the past that you want me to revisit, do a deeper dive on, that survey is how I get that information from you. So of course it is optional, but if you would like to participate in that survey, please add your email address into the chat and I will send you that survey after we end today. So it's 10:02, our time has started. So I'm gonna go ahead and get right into the information. So what are we gonna discuss today? Well, we're gonna discuss what affirmations are and how they work. Go figure, right? That's the name of the presentation. We're also going to go over some benefits of affirmations, and I'm going to tell you how you can use affirmations and some suggestions to get you started. So I love affirmations because it directly affects the way we talk to ourselves, okay? We have a really bad habit as a species of being incredibly difficult in our own minds towards ourselves. We can be incredibly critical. We can be incredibly mean. There are things that we will say to ourselves that we would never utter out loud to another human being, yet we say it to ourselves constantly. And so I love affirmations because it's a way for us to counteract. It's a tool in our toolbox. So when those negative thoughts come up, those cognitive distortions come up, we have a set of things that we can say back to those distortions and really get us back on a pathway of more positive thinking. And as we know, the way we perceive our world is the way that we interact with the world. And so if we see our world more positively, if we see ourselves more positively, we're more likely to interact with our world more positively. And that's the goal for today, right? Is to give you that foundation to get you to understand what affirmations are, and give you tips on how you can use them. And hopefully, if it appeals to you, if you think it'll be useful for you, you'll feel more confident in starting your own affirmation practice going forward, okay? Of course, I'm open to any comments or questions. Just enter them into the chat and we'll get to them at the end. I'm gonna try to run through this information at a good pacing, but if you need me to slow down or if you have a question or whatever, please feel free to interrupt me. I'm more than happy to address that during the presentation. But as always, these trainings are recorded. So if you missed something or you want to go back and hear it again, they will be available. This training will be available on our website probably early Monday. But I did do this training prior to this about a year ago. So there is the old recording on there with the same information if you're interested in looking at it over the weekend, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and dive into this info. So what are affirmations? We kind of hear that word a lot. It's kind of a buzzword in pop psychology. Affirmations is really just phrases, mantras, things that we say to ourselves that are positive, okay? So every minute of every day, our bodies are changing in response to how we think, right? What are we telling ourselves? So just thinking about something can trigger the brain to send signals to release neurotransmitters, right? Dopamine, oxytocin, all these things. And those chemicals control almost all of our body functions, right? So that's our mood and our feelings and all other things. But over time, through a process called neuroplasticity, which is our brain's capacity to make new connections, our thoughts can change our brain, it can change our cells, and even our genes, which is pretty interesting. So what we think, what we visualize, what we say to ourselves, that can actually change our brain, our body, and our life, okay? And that's the basis of affirmations. So one way that we can harness that power of neuroplasticity is with affirmations, right? So we dig into the research about affirmations, and it shows that positive affirmations can help us handle life challenges better. They're a mental health tool that can improve our self-image and build a stronger brain. Positive affirmations work because of neuroscience, right? That's how they work. This neuroscience is just the study of how our nervous system functions, okay? So by regularly repeating affirming statements, our brain creates new pathways and new physical connections related to these thoughts in our brain. So positive affirmations, they can provide long-term benefits. They create positive feedback loop that helps us to adapt over time. So right now, if you really stopped and thought about the things you think about, right? It's not uncommon for us to have these negative thought loops, right? And they're just kind of ambient in the background. And affirmations are a way to send us on a positive thought loop, okay, over time. And so self-affirmations can also lessen that threat, the threat that challenges pose to our self-worth, right? How many times have you maybe goofed, right? Made a little mistake and then you just dwell on it, you ruminate on it, right? You label yourself, or I'm so this, I'm so that, right? Affirmations are a way for us to counteract those negative thoughts. Now, I don't want you to get the idea that I'm saying if you just think positively, your life's going to be perfect, okay? Because that's not true. That's not realistic. Affirmations are just a tool that we can use in our toolbox among a lot of other tools that we have in our toolbox to just help us build that resiliency, right? And if you've participated in one of my trainings, you know that is the goal. It's not about removing stressors or changing things in our lives that we can't change. It's about being able to be resilient to that stress when it crops up, because it's probably not going anywhere. It's probably been around for a long time. And if it's not one thing, it's another thing that's stressing you out, right? So this is not a magic pill. This is not a cure for negative thinking. It's just a resource that we can use if it works for us, right? Science shows that it does work for many of us, but everything's not going to work for everyone, and that's just realistic. So going forward, hopefully, I hope you know that's my intent is not to fool you into thinking affirmations are going to change your world, and make it easy for you, but it can make it easier, and it can facilitate change in your life. Okay. So what's the difference between a positive affirmation and positive thinking? Because they sound pretty similar, right? It's because they're both using optimistic thoughts that lead us to self-improvement, okay? But they're very different, even though they have interrelated ideas, okay? So a positive affirmation, those are empowering words or phrases that we repeat to challenge negative thoughts and improve the way we see ourselves, okay? And they're often focused on specific goals or areas of self-improvement, okay? And positive thinking is just focusing regularly on healthy thoughts and beliefs, even when things don't go as planned, right? To always see that silver lining, or to be in a space of gratitude, right? And that's going to be to all aspects of your life, okay? So positive thinking is more of a posture you take, right? A way that you're choosing to see the world. And positive affirmations are concise, directed mantras or sayings that are specific to what you're trying to change or influence in your life. Okay, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. But again, affirmations can be used as a tool to create a mindset that is conducive to positive thought patterns. Okay, so sometimes you're struggling to get into that posture of positive thinking, right? You're not there yet, and that's okay. Positive affirmations can lead to that, okay? Because the more we talk positively to ourselves, the more we're going to have that positive outlook in general in our lives, okay? So they are connected, but they're not the same. So how do they work, right? I kind of briefly said that, or talked about it a little bit here, but I'm going to dive a little bit deeper. So there is a study that was published in the Journal of Social Cognitive and Affective Neuroscience, okay? And they used MRIs, it's just basically like mapping of the brain, and they revealed that practicing self-affirmation activates reward centers in your brain, okay? So simply saying to yourself, I will earn a promotion, for example, that's going to light up the same reward centers in your brain that respond to other pleasurable experiences like eating good food or winning a prize. It just fires up that neural pathway, and it makes changes to those areas of the brain that make you feel more happy and positive. Okay, so this is what they did when they put the imaging on the brain or whatnot and had somebody say a positive affirmation. They saw those centers in the brain that are connected to reward light up. Okay, so these studies suggest that people who are prone to positive sentiments, that are more happy just in general, they're going to be less reactive to emotional stimuli than negative thinkers, right? And if you think about that, that makes sense. If you're always in your mind cutting yourself down or looking at the world around you in a very negative way, when emotional stimuli happens, right? Say, maybe someone's having a bad day, or they get angry with you or grumpy with you, right? You're going to be less resilient to that, okay? If you're constantly a negative thinker, right? You're going to be more reactive in that space. Conversely, a positive thinker is someone who's more happy. When somebody's grumpy and angry to them, it's more likely that they'll just be able to brush it off, right? It's not going to impact them in the same way as somebody who's more negative, okay? So scientific evidence also suggests that techniques like mindfulness or other forms of meditation that can actually affect how the brain responds to emotional stimuli, right? So for example, if you practice self-affirming, focusing on future-oriented values, you might show heightened activity in the brain systems responsible for self-processing and evaluation compared to individuals that don't. So what that basically means is that if you are intentional about these mindful practices, gratitude practices, right, really being more self-aware, um, more aware of your thought patterns, you're going to have a different response to emotional stimuli than someone who doesn't have these practices in place. And if you do not have these practices in place, that is a great hope for you, right? That maybe if you start to do these things, you're going to be less reactive to emotional stimuli. And we all know that when we get stressed out, when we're burnt out, when we don't have the reserves, it's very, very easy to slide down into that space of emotional reactivity, right? So affirmations, again, are not a magic pill, right? They're not going to cure you overnight, quote unquote. But this is something that you can practice over time to help build up that resiliency to stimuli, okay, emotional stimuli. And most of these things that I tell to you about, I often try to really drive that point home. If it's a practice, it's because it takes time. Okay. It's not going to be an overnight. It's not going to be, well, I said something nice to myself this morning and I still feel like garbage. Okay. That's okay. It's going to be like that until you build up that, just like when you're in the gym or you're starting a new workout routine, right? It's going to take some time for you to build up that endurance and build up that muscle. It's the same is true with your emotional resilience. Okay. So it will take time, but it will happen. Okay. So let's see a little bit more. How do they work? So our brain is a really beautiful creation, right? But it's also kind of lazy. So we are always trying to find shortcuts, okay, with our brain. So the brain evolved for purposes of keeping us alive, right? So we're supposed to be able to make quick, snap decisions about food and safety and not really make rigorous analytical assessments about everything, right? We don't sit and think about things that could be potentially dangerous. We just see it as danger when we take action, right? But our brain is always creating these shortcuts, and this can lead to something we call cognitive biases, okay? And so those are beliefs that we have without justification, okay? And we all have them, okay? So here's a few that you maybe recognize yourself, okay? So one is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. So this is the tendency for novices to overestimate their skill and experts to underestimate their skill, okay? Um, Observational selection bias. So this is the tendency to notice more of something once it's been noticed. So like if you buy a new car, suddenly you're seeing that car everywhere, okay? Confirmation bias. So this is the tendency to see more of and believe more of what already confirms our beliefs. It's why we think everyone else must believe the news stories on our Facebook algorithm shows us. It's in our feed. We assume it's in everybody else's feed, but it's not, okay? And we can see confirmation bias a lot in our world today, especially with social media, right? If you are using social media and you are watching videos or reading posts that come up, the algorithm is going to say, hey, you like these things, I'm going to keep showing you more, right? And so it's going to confirm your biases. You're going to think, this is how the world works, this is what I'm seeing, this is all there is, right? And we don't even see the other side, right? Because it's not popping up on our feed. So this happens a lot frequently in our world, and we might not even be aware it's happening. So as we mentioned, in reality, the shortcuts in our brain, it's really just to help us avoid thinking, right? Thinking takes a lot of energy, and our bodies are designed to conserve energy, right? And so if we can find shortcuts in our thinking process, then our brain's happy, right? Because it's like, wow, I didn't have to spend all that energy thinking about these things, right? But the magic of affirmations is that they hijack those cognitive biases for our own benefit, okay? So they can teach our brain a new way to think about the world, right? What we feed into our brain is what we're going to digest and see, right? Good, bad, and ugly, right? So if we repeat phrases to convince our brain that we're going to achieve our goals, then our brain is going to start to subconsciously search for signs that will make this true. So when it does, the brain will then present signs to the conscious mind, right? So if you think about, I know we talked previously about the negativity bias, right? Where our brains are wired to see the negative before we see the positive, because that's how we're going to be protected, right? If our brain sees something off in the prairie, right? Say our ancestors saw something out in the grass, it could be a giant rock or it could be a tiger, right? And our brain is going to automatically go, that's a tiger, because then it's going to prepare us to run off, right? Because if it's a rock, we think it's a tiger, we run off, it's going to be safe, no harm done, right? But if we think it's a rock and it's actually a tiger, then guess what? We're lunch, right? So our brains see the negative first as a way to protect ourselves. So what affirmations do is it really tricks the brain to look for positives first, okay? Which again is why it's a practice, why it takes time to convince our brains that things are better than what we actually have been believing for a while, right? About ourselves and our world around us, okay? So we'll start to notice points and proofs that help us achieve our goals, whether that's to be more patient, to be more compassionate, what have you, okay? So the affirmations just need time to help our brains to tune in to that good stuff, okay? So what are some benefits of affirmations? So we can overcome self-sabotaging. I think we do this and don't realize we're doing it sometimes. Self-sabotage happens when we intentionally or unintentionally create barriers to our own success, okay? So that can look like procrastination. That can look like perfectionism, right? If I can't do it perfect, I might as well not do it at all, okay? That kind of thing. And when it happens regularly, this can impact almost every area of the self-saboteur's life, right? Including our employment, our relationships, our overall health and well-being. And positive affirmations help stop this cycle by interrupting those negative thought patterns that result in things like low self-esteem, fear of failure, and other self-sabotaging behaviors. So we can reassert our closely held values. Affirmation intervention can create healthier mindsets, and affirming statements that challenge problematic "I can't" beliefs promote self-confidence, right? And they help us to find the steps, the action steps that we can take to restore that self-competence or that self-confidence, right? And be more effective in achieving our goals. So again, affirmations, they just challenge those unhelpful beliefs that threaten our sense of self, right? I'm so lazy, I'm thoughtless, I'm careless, right? Whatever that might be. When we reaffirm our core values through empowering, personalized positive statements or affirmations, we can reclaim our positive self-view. We can enhance our self-esteem, okay? These beneficial messages can also reduce defensiveness associated with threats to the individual's sense of self, right? So if we know who we are, right? If we take these affirmations seriously and we really want to build up our self-esteem and our self-confidence, when somebody challenges that sense of self, we're less likely to put a lot of faith or stock into that, right? Because we know who we are, okay? But if we're constantly heaping shame on ourselves and we're constantly cutting ourselves down, when somebody else joins that chorus, guess what? We're going to believe that, right? So really, a benefit of self-affirmation is just build up your self-esteem, right? And know who you are, regardless of what other people think, okay? Or even regardless of what you maybe have been thinking of your own self, right? Next, again, reducing that negative self-talk and those negative feelings, right? So when we regularly engage in negative self-talk, guess what? That's going to really be a detriment to our well-being, our sense of wellness, our mental health, right? If we are often repeating phrases like "I'm useless" or "I'll never be good enough," that's going to lead us to anxiety and depression and low self-esteem, right? And this self-directed criticism, that's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And it can really damage our personal relationships, our work relationships, and it can lead to self-isolation. Remember, if you're telling your brain you're useless and you're telling your brain you're not good enough, your brain's going to start looking for clues to back that up, right? So it's going to start pointing out all your mistakes. It's really going to feed that beast of that inner critic, okay? And affirmations will reduce that, right? It'll give us something positive to look forward to, okay? So this can really be an antidote to those negative feelings and that negative self-talk. But again, it will take time, but repeating positive or at least neutral messaging to yourself, if you're having a hard time being positive, you can at least take a neutral stance. It is possible to rewire our brain for positivity. And I'll just say in my life, it's been very, very beneficial. Next, changing those negative thinking patterns. Again, it's just really telling your brain who's boss, right? I'm not going to get into these lazy cycles of self criticisms, right? So if you engage in these, I'm going to go through some of these common negative thinking patterns, okay? And you might find familiarity in some of these. So catastrophizing. So that is where we go to worst case scenario, right? Let's say you called mom, she almost always answers, but this time she didn't answer. So in your head, you're thinking, oh man, she fell, she's on the floor, she can't reach the phone, she's probably been there all night, and then you run home and you run there and you realize, well, no, she was just watching a movie, didn't hear the phone or something like that, right? But we jump to that worst case scenario, okay? That's called catastrophizing. Next is overgeneralizing. And I think this is one we do all the time and don't even realize we're doing it, where we make a mistake or something doesn't go as planned. And then we go, this always happens, right? I always do the wrong thing, right? I'm never going to figure this out, right? So that's taking one negative instance and blanket statementing, right? Putting a blanket statement over who we are as a person, right? So we make one mistake and then we think, I'm never going to do this right. Okay. That's what we call overgeneralizing. Jumping to conclusions. So this is where we think we know what somebody else thinks before they even express what they think, right? We're just going to jump to that conclusion. We're going to assume we know what's going to happen, even though we have no evidence to back it up. Okay. And then the next one is all or nothing categorizing. This is going to use some of the same phrasing as overgeneralization, right? Where it's like, I'm always this way and I'm never going to be that way, right? Or perfectionism falls into this too, right? Where if I can't do it perfect, I'm not going to do it at all. Okay. So those are just some examples. And so they can obviously negatively impact almost every aspect of our lives. So our health, our family, our education, our employment, right? Negative thought patterns are related with self-related criticisms, and they typically don't go away on their own, okay? But by practicing affirmations, we can actually break through these repetitive thoughts and replace them with more positive ways of thinking. So through repetition, positive daily affirmations can override those harmful thought patterns and provide a healthier, more realistic message to ourselves, okay? So how do we use affirmations? So I think there's really no right or wrong way to do them. The key is really just in repetition, okay? So again, recent research says that people are more likely to consider repeated information true, more so than statements they've only heard once, okay? And we can probably all think of something that we've heard repeated over and over and over again, whether that's by, news anchors or people in our environment, right? Where they'll just say things like it's true over and over and over again, and eventually they believe it or you believe it, right? Even if there's no fact to base it up, to back it up, there's no truth to base it on. It's just been repeated. And so study shows that if you just repeat something enough, it becomes true because people will believe it's true, more so than if they've only heard something one time, okay? So we can use this to our advantage in a positive way. Repeating positive statements associated with the self rather than expressing negative thoughts, we're going to more likely perceive that as true, right? So if we're always telling ourselves we're no good, we're going to believe we're no good, even if there's no evidence to that, okay? But if we're telling ourselves that we're doing our best, we're going to believe we're doing our best, okay? And we're going to start seeing proof of that in our environment, okay? So self-affirmation practice can have a lot of mental and physical benefits, but how you choose to self-affirm is really crucial to your success, okay? So for the best outcomes, affirmations should be focused and consistent, okay? Messages should be repeated multiple times each day, if possible, either at set times or right before a challenging event or right after a challenging event. So that way you can kind of reinforce that positive thinking pattern. So if for instance, let's just say you're having a conversation with somebody who maybe doesn't make you feel so great about yourself, right? Maybe they criticize you a lot, okay, whether that's in caregiving or otherwise. And then you get off the phone and then you think, wow, they're right. This is true, that's true, right? And you have a pattern of kind of accepting what they're saying as truth. A self-affirmation after that conversation can reroute that thought pattern. Okay. So I know this is what they said, but this is the evidence, right? I know I'm a good caretaker. I know I'm a good mother. I know I'm a good spouse, right? Whatever that is. And then you start to look for proof of that in your environment. And the more you do it, the easier it's going to be to find that proof. Okay. Next. So this, I think, is, I'm going to give you the ideal space. Okay. This is the ideal way to practice affirmations. But I also encourage you to modify it to your reality. Okay. Not everyone's going to have the time to sit down every day and do affirmations. And I know that. Okay. That's the picture perfect way. But I would just like to say, as a side note, do what you can when you can. Okay. And if the practice to get you thinking more positively about yourself creates shame around how you're supposed to be doing it, then it's defeating the purpose, right? So anytime a practice starts to make you feel shame, it's not your practice, or you're not doing it. You're trying to do it a way that's not conducive to your lifestyle. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So we want to find a calm and quiet space if we can. So this could be maybe if you have quiet time in the morning, right? Sometimes people wake up early and that's when they do their meditation. That's when they do their prayer. That's when they do their exercise or whatever it is they do for themselves, okay? You can sprinkle in affirmations in that space. Or maybe it's before you go to bed, right? It's when you do your journaling or your gratitude practice or what have you. Throw the affirmations in there, okay? Whatever that looks like for you. So of course, avoid interruptions if possible. If you can shut a door, do that. If you have a calm, clutter-free space, be there or create one for yourself. And try to remain calm during your recitation. I think that's how you pronounce that word. And try to form that positive mental image that embodies each message. Okay. So affirmations work pretty much, you can just say them, right? Or think them. Saying them out loud is going to work best. But also trying to keep that environment distraction free as much as possible. Okay. And that's going to help you really get into these affirmations and really hear them and, just have that space where it's just for you, right? And you're not distracted by other things or other tasks. Next, avoid using stock affirmations. So I feel this is yes and no, right? I think if you are just getting into affirmations and you're not really sure where to start, there's a lot available with stock affirmations that can be helpful to you, right? But of course, over time, or maybe if you don't find any that work well for you, creating them is ideal for yourself, right? So that they're personalized. They're not just generic sayings, right? They make sense and they have meaning to you, okay? So when you create your own affirmations, you can begin by identifying goals or desires or core values, right, that you have, and transition them into positive statements, okay? So one could just be, I can speak up on my own behalf, right? That's a positive affirmation. If you struggle with boundaries, right, that could be a good one for you. And to improve the outcome, stick with something that's realistic or that's believable, right? So you can say things like, I'll take steps each day to become more patient, right? That's realistic. I'm going to try to be more patient every day, okay? But if you say, I will never be frustrated again, that's not really realistic, right? We're human beings. We're going to be frustrated, right? So we don't want to use things that are improbable or not realistic, okay? And it might also be helpful to adapt affirmations to situations that arise. So we can create spur of the moment statements and provide that motivation, okay? And if you are creating your own affirmations, we want to avoid any negative thoughts in a positive affirmation, okay? So we won't want to say, I'm never going to be, I'm never going to be stupid again, right? We're all going to be stupid at some time, right? We're all going to make silly choices. And so we don't want to use words that are shameful in our affirmations. Okay, we can always say, like, I'm going to take steps every day to be more aware or something like that, right, of my choices. So again, just don't use negative thoughts in positive affirmations. Okay. And so we want to change negative sentiments into positive messages. Okay. So how can we get started? So affirmations might be more effective when we pair them with other positive thinking and goal setting techniques. Okay, so for instance, affirmations work really well alongside visualization. So instead of just picturing a change you'd like to see, you can also write it down or say it aloud using positive affirmations. And they can also be useful when you set personal goals. So once you've identified a goal you'd like to achieve, affirmative statements can help you keep yourself motivated in order to achieve them. So the power of affirmation, again, really just lies in you repeating them to yourself regularly. And it is useful to recite your affirmations several times a day. If you have time, right? Maybe you can even set like a little reminder on your phone to say, hey, take some time to be kind to yourself. And you want to repeat them as soon as you engage in a negative thought or behavior that you want to overcome. Okay. So it's that in the moment thing you can use to redirect your thought pattern. Okay. So you're not as inclined to ruminate or be in that space of negativity or self-sabotaging talk, because now you have a positive affirmation to counteract that. Okay. And this is why creating your own can be incredibly useful, because you know yourself, right? You know what your triggers are. You know where you get into that stinking thinking rut, right? And so you know what would need to be said to you in those moments to kind of kick you out of that space. Okay. But again, stock affirmations are perfectly okay, especially if you're just starting out, or if you find some that are particularly poetic or resonate with you, right? It's okay to use those. But again, they have to be applicable to what you're struggling with and what your goals are. Okay. They shouldn't just be random affirmations. Okay. They should be meaningful to you. So how do you write a meaningful statement, right? If you're wanting to do that, they're going to usually target a specific area or behavior or belief that you're struggling with. Okay. So this is, of course, just a foundation or a framework. Okay. You do what works best for you. So think about the areas of your life that you would like to change, right? So for instance, do you wish that you had more patience or maybe deeper relationships with your friends and colleagues or family members? Maybe you'd like to have a more productive day, right? So write down several areas of behaviors that you'd like to work on. Make sure that they're compatible with your core values and the things that matter the most to you, okay? So that way you're gonna feel more motivated to achieve them if they mean something to you. Again, be sure that your affirmation is credible and achievable, right? Base it on realistic assessment of the facts. Keep it realistic, right? Affirmations are not magic spells. And if you can't believe them, they're not really going to impact your life very much, right? So we don't want to say, in 2 years or 5 years, I'm going to be the president of the United States, right? Some of you might. I'm not saying that's impossible, but it's not very probable, right, that you're going to be that position. But you could say things, I'm going to, I'm going to be more patient, or I'm going to be more compassionate, or I want to be less critical of myself. Okay. Just things that are actually achievable and mean something to you. Next, turn negatives into positives. So if you're struggling with that negative self-talk, which many of us are, just note down those persistent thoughts or beliefs that keep coming up, right? So when you choose an affirmation that's the opposite of that thought and belief, it's going to impact you a lot better, right? So for example, if you are constantly in the habit of thinking, I don't have enough talent to progress in my career, right? You can turn this around and write a positive affirmation like, I am a skilled and experienced professional, right? If that's applicable to you, okay? If you're always thinking, say, I'm not, like, just a very generic one, I'm not as patient with mom as I would like to be, okay? You could just say, I'm practicing patience. I'm growing in patience, right? I desire patience. And so you're still addressing the issue or the thought, but you're not doing it in a shameful, negative, self-sabotaging way. Okay, so you're still focusing on what you want to change or behavior that you want to incorporate into your life, without that negative connotation on it. Okay. Write your affirmation in the present tense. So write and speak your affirmations as if it's already happening. So this will help you to believe the statement is true right now, right? So for instance, I am well prepared and well rehearsed, and I can give a great presentation. That would be a great affirmation to use if you're nervous speaking in front of a group, okay? Say it with feeling, okay? So affirmations are more effective when they carry emotional weight. So if you want this change to happen, every affirmation you choose to repeat should be a phrase that's meaningful to you. So, for example, if you're worried about a new project that you have to get done that's coming down the pipeline, you can tell yourself, I'm really excited to take on new challenges, right? Um, and that's just a good way of saying, I'm feeling something about this, right? And it could be anxiety, it could be fear, but it could be excitement, right? It's a new challenge. It's going to be scary, but that's okay, right? Not everything that's scary is bad. It can be a great opportunity for you to really flex your muscles, and see what you're made of, right? So it's really just about your perspective. So I know that was quick. It's pretty a simple practice. Again, it's really just about the repetition. It's about making sure that you believe what you're saying to yourself, that your affirmations are realistic, okay? And it's and the timing of it. So if you find yourself sliding into these negative thought patterns, this catastrophizing, overgeneralization, those kinds of things, you have these affirmations ready to counteract that thought, okay? And again, over time, you're not going to have to think about it as much. It's just going to become second nature to you. Okay. And I'm speaking from personal experience. Okay. It's not just something I read about. This is something I do daily. And now it is becoming like that inner critic is now my inner fan, right? I'm always cheering myself on. And it wasn't always like that, right? It took me a long time to get to this space where I have a posture of positivity. Okay. So it can happen. If I could do it as grumpy and curmudgeon as I've been in my life, anybody can do it. Okay. So let me stop my share and my recording.